right, let's bring in Darren Dreger this morning for Pro-Am Sports. Dregs, we got to start with the Super Bowl. I mean, an all-time blowout, and the Eagles come away with the dub. What'd you think of the game?
Not much. I mean, from a competitive standpoint, there wasn't a whole lot to be entertained or excited by, and actually more shocked than anything. Right? I did feel, and I'm far from an expert when it comes to football or the National Football League or the Super Bowl, but Philadelphia had the edge for me going into this one, but I was interested and intrigued by the history on the line with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm a big fan of Andy Reid. And, of course, you've got the story of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and go down the list and all that. Who would have predicted that it was going to be a whitewash like that? I mean, they just didn't have an answer, in every aspect of the game. So everything about it was disappointing, including the halftime show. And it's another reason why I never watch halftime shows. And all my buddies are up north at a cottage. Yeah, I couldn't go this weekend, so I stayed home. So I watched the Super Bowl in essence by myself. So here I am. I'm watching the halftime. What are we watching here? And I muted it and got up and did something until the third quarter started.
We were having a Super Bowl party at a casino, and that's when I went out to the tables and played for a little bit.
We usually have a Ryan Rashog Monday morning breakdown of the Super Bowl halftime show. He's not joining us today, but I think you filled the booth.
I think you've kind of filled the booth pretty well. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Shoggy would have said the exact same thing. Darren Dreger joins us on the show this morning. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. He's brought to you by Pro-Am Sports. Four Nations, here we go. It seemed like the story over the weekend was guys who weren't going to be there, obviously, with Quinn Hughes. The Finnish blue line has taken an absolute beating. It's almost like we just need to sort of drop the puck of this tournament, and then the momentum will start to build, right?
Yeah, I think so. And unfortunately, you're talking about significant names here from, Team Canada, Team USA, Quinn Hughes having a bow out. That's a real tough one. And, I know the Hughes family well. Known him for a long, long time. And I saw our colleague Rick Dollywall tweet a quote from Pat Brasano, represents Quinn, and just said, look, he's never quit on anything in his life. And, to me, as I'm reading that, and I know Quinn, and I know how much he loves to compete, right? And especially when he's draped in the American flag. This would be a significant blow for him, but he's recognizing that, the final leg of the regular season for the Vancouver Canucks is huge, and it's going to position them for, number one, trying to lock down that playoff spot. And then, let's see what happens with Vancouver. We know they're in the market for a center between now and the trade deadline, but his focus is where it needs to be. And that's with the Canucks and this playoff push. And then you flip over to Team Canada. I wasn't surprised because the word that we were getting on Sidney Crosby was that there was progress being made. So then to learn and report that, he made his way to Montreal and that Canadian management is looking forward to the outcome of him skating with the group, or however they're going to evaluate today, I don't know. But they've got a tough call to make by 5:00 Eastern today, because that's the final roster.
That's when you got to lock it in. Yeah,
that's when you've got to lock it in. So what do you do there? And I think you leave it entirely up to Sid, right? I think we could all envision, okay, well, if it's worst case that you've got to give Crosby game one off, and then he's set for the weekend, okay, well, I think we could live with that. But then you've got a healthy Mark Scheifele of the Winnipeg Jets, sitting there waiting. So, it'll come down to Sid and how he feels. But the fact that he feels strong enough to make the trek to Montreal and give it one more go, at least one more go, I think that bodes well for him participating. But those are big name guys, right? I mean, with all due respect to the Finnish guys, there's some interesting names who unfortunately aren't going to participate. But when you're talking about Quinn Hughes, you're talking about Sidney Crosby. Those are big holes to fill for Canada and for Team USA.
Yeah, and the problem for Finland is that the blue line was already the weakest element of that roster.
Yeah.
Now they take a hit. So I mean, it's going to be tough for them. Connor McDavid has, and we saw it on Friday night. I mean, Colorado, Edmonton, McKinnon was spectacular. Makar was excellent. Draisaitl's great season continued. And McDavid just didn't seem to be at that level. He's got 15 points in his last 13 games. The team has obviously been going through some sickness. over the last couple of weeks, and that probably ties into it. But
Yeah.
what type of expectations do you think we should have for McDavid getting this chance to play with these guys for this country for essentially his first time in his prime?
Well, that's going to be what's interesting, right? The sky here clearly is the limit, and how do you put a level of expectation on McDavid? You can't, because we've seen him electrify. We've seen him do things that just aren't human from a hockey perspective. But now you've got to share that sheet of ice and one puck with future Hall of Famers across the board. So it is going to be interesting. I think that this is going to be a formidable challenge for all the coaches, not just John Cooper and Team Canada, but what is the role in such a short window? We had Mike Keenan on the Darren Dreger podcast last Thursday, and he talked about a couple of things. Now, keep in mind when they were winning Canada Cups in 1987, it was during the off season, so they had unlimited time to prepare for that from a coaching, from a mental perspective, and guys weren't diving out of that tournament and right back into the regular season of the National Hockey League. So from a coaching perspective, it's not as simple as saying, okay, Connor, here's what you're lining up with, go and do your thing. No, I mean, there's got to be some technical work that's applied in all of this. What sort of matchups do you expect to see against the other three countries and all of that? So I expect the best from Connor McDavid. I assume he's healthy. I did hear that, flu bug kind of made its way and has for the last couple of weeks through the National Hockey League. But how can you not expect greatness when you put a player of that significance out there with some of the best on the planet? I think it's going to be good.
Darren, what do you expect maybe off the ice during this tournament? Do we expect a gentleman's agreement, I guess, between GMs and kind of a standing pat? Obviously some chatting, but I mean, you got your ear to the ground. What do you think is going to kind of transpire, if anything at all, during this tournament off the ice?
Well, when you say gentleman's agreement, really what you mean is Commissioner Bettman saying do not make a trade of any significance unless you cannot avoid it, especially on game days. And I mean, we joke about that, and I don't know how strong the commissioner's office would ever apply that. Look, I mean, you never want to upstage the event, but as we've shared before and talked about, I mean, hey, the Ottawa Senators made the Linus Ullmark trade on Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final last year. So, I mean, all bets are off when you're trying to make a significant add and you're trying to improve your roster. And there is that sense around the league that, and I don't want to use the word frenzy because I don't want to set us up for disappointment here, but the potential of that is certainly in play when the Four Nations ends. And the reason that there's a higher level of potential is because of what we already saw in some of the significant trades that went down leading up to the start of this event. So it does make sense that there will be a heightened level of urgency. And not every general manager, not every player, not every coach is involved in the Four Nations. And some of these guys, players, of course, are enjoying some fun in the sun and a little bit of downtime to recharge at this point of the regular season. But most of the general managers, it is business as usual, no matter where their locale is. So I'd be surprised if there's anything that matters on the trade front, but there'll be a ton of back and forth. There'll be lots of conversation, no doubt about that.
Dregs, as always, man, we really appreciate the time. Enjoy this first week of the Four Nations, and we'll set up the final couple round robin games and I guess the final next week.
Yeah, you bet, fellas. You too. Enjoy it.
There you go. That's Darren Dreger, Ray and Dregs podcast, and of course, TSN Hockey Insider as well.